What's up, Vape fam? Sorteal here, and welcome to the Vaporworks lab. Got a 28mm mesh RTA to take a look at today. I've actually been anxiously awaiting this one. It was supposed to come out back in October, and then that didn't happen. It got pushed. Then all the laws in China changed in November, so it got pushed back a little bit further. It finally came out, I think, the end of November, beginning of December, depending on where you were at in the world. And I just finally got mine about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. It is the Profile X from Wotofo. Now, this is the only profile that I know of that Joel Robinson, Mr. Just Right One, had nothing to do with. And the story, the way I understand it, which is second, third, 15th, 18th hand, is that Joel wanted to work on something else, either by himself or with another company or with Wotofo, but Wotofo was like, no, we're doing this. If you want to do this, cool. If not, whatever. And Joel was like, well, I'm gonna go do my thing. You all take it easy. Now, I wouldn't imagine that it fractured the relationship at all. It sounds like they just kind of were like, all right, well, on this particular project, we're not doing it together or anything like that. But I don't think that this is going to be the end of the relationship between Mr. Just Right One and Wotofo at all. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead, dive on over, show you all the ins and outs. We'll break it apart, build it, wick it, juice it, come back up, vape on it, and I'll tell you guys what I think. So let's dive on over. All right, here's the package that your Profile X will come in. I'm not going to show you much of this at all because Wotofo loves to splash their URL all over the place. I don't even have the top cover sleeve because it has it like right there. This, like I said, is a 28mm RTA. The straight glass holds 5 milliliters, unless of course you're in a TPA area, and that's 2. And then the bubble glass holds 8 milliliters of liquid. I really kind of like the look of this. It's just a very cool looking RTA. Top airflow, while fine for mesh usually, not the greatest for coils, and this does take coils. It actually has leg lead inserts. It is essentially the same deck as the Profile RTA, which is my favorite mesh deck of all time, hands down. So I was pretty anxious for this one just because it had the same deck. All right, not going to show you what's on the bottom of this because Wotofo splashed their URL down there as well. This right here is a set 510 pin. I don't believe you can get it out at all. This is just flat. It doesn't push up in there, but just given how set 510 pins are, I'm not sure this is actually hybrid mechanical mod safe, but we will see. Let's go ahead, crack this thing open. Actually, I will show you as quarter turn quick release. Kidney holes are a little bit smaller than I would have actually thought given a 28mm, but I do like how concave it is, so it's not so easy just to overfill and have it run down here or these sides of your RTA. The bottom there. All right, so here's your airflow. Kind of cuts it down. Pretty simple. All right, let's take this base off. Show you the deck. Comes off pretty easy, just unscrew the bottom. Very similar to how the Profile M. Here's the inside of that kind of dome shaped cap there in the chimney. As you can see, it's just kind of straight slits for the airflow to come down. It is honeycombed up here so it doesn't whistle or anything like that, but just the way they chose to kind of position the airflow on this is just not, it's not good. It's okay for mesh, but it's going to just be awful for coils, which is already a big con to this. All right, so here's the deck. I love this fucking deck. So you can put mesh in this. It's the wider Wotofo strip, so like the extreme, the chill, the turbo. And then you have 2 more screws on each side. And those are for the leg lead inserts right there with their own separate grub screws. So you can install coils on this, extremely simple. And On the Profile RTA, it works outstanding. On this, not so much. So if you're going to buy this thinking, well, I don't really care so much about mesh, but hey, it's got that deck where I can put coils in it, and I liked that on the Profile RTA. You might want to think twice about it just because of how the airflow is on this one in particular, because it is truly top-down airflow. So with this, it's just going to kind of come down. I mean, your coils are going to be somewhat close to that, but most of the airflow is just going to go straight up and almost completely miss your coil. Now, as far as wicking goes, I do like the wicking on this better than like the Profile M or the Unity, because it has the cotton exposed to the inside of the tank. So I love that about it. I just wish they'd gone with a different style of airflow, and I wish it wasn't a set 510 pin. Now, I don't think this actually goes in at all, so it's probably hybrid mechanical mod safe, but I just don't trust it. All right, let's go ahead, stick this thing on the Hadron Plus. We're definitely going to build it up as mesh. It does come with several strips of 6mm and 3mm cotton. And it comes with a bunch of mesh and coils, which is kind of cool. We're going to go for the extreme mesh because that's just my favorite with any of the Wotofo mesh. And the reason I say that woven mesh is the best type of mesh to use, it doesn't get gunked up the way that a lot of other styles of mesh can get gunked up, and it's just more heated surface area over that cotton, so it tends to have better flavor overall. Let's grab their tool for bending. This is screwdriver, and their bending tool now is a little different. I think they realized, make sure it's not, doesn't have their URL on it. Just a simple rod now. It's kind of cheap. I was hoping they do something similar to what Steam Crave did with the Hadron mesh deck, but no such luck. They just went even cheaper. But I think also they realized they didn't need all that extra stuff going on. Just needed something you can bend your mesh around and get it to take shape. And then if you need to reshape it under the mesh once you have it installed, you can always either use this or screwdriver. Plenty of other things you can use to kind of reshape it that actually work better than that old Wotofo tool. I think that's about damn perfect. Well, it was. It's still about perfect. And one of the reasons I like the larger mesh deck compared to kind of, the more commonly used smaller strips type of deck is it's just easier to position your mesh and get it straight. It uses that extreme mesh, the woven mesh. You get more cotton underneath there. You can actually wick it a lot thicker, and it just works. So we're actually going to use some Cloud 9 cotton in this. And I'm going to use my kind of crazy wicking method. So just be prepared. So we got a big, gigantic, thick ass strip like that. You've seen my video going over wicking mesh for long periods of time without having to change your cotton. It's the same style. We're going to do the exact same thing. Always want to make sure where you've got it flattened out together, like right there, is facing upwards. All right. About like that. The difference with this one, and the biggest like headache with this mesh deck in particular is wicking. This has to be one of the most finicky mesh decks for wicking I've ever come across. All right. So we're actually going to do even more of a haircut here, because this wicking system does not want much wick at all. And this being mesh, you have to have a ton of cotton underneath the mesh itself. But to wick it as far as the channels go, it doesn't want a lot of wick. So you got to kind of give it a buzz cut, and then you want just this sliver. See how much of just a straight sliver that is? That's about all you want for this. And honestly, that might be too much. So the goal basically is to have a ton of cotton underneath the mesh itself, not a lot of cotton going down into those wicking channels. The other thing with wicking mesh in general, but this one particularly, is it's never pretty. Like I said, this may still be too much. So that is about how we got it. That actually is probably too much cotton in those wicking channels. But I think it'll actually work once we get it juiced up. So you don't want a lot of cotton at all going into those actual wick channels. I'm just going to keep repeating that, because if you try and wick this like a standard mesh RTA, it's not going to work and you're going to hate it. But way it is right here should be all right, hopefully. All right, being that it's mesh, I'm going to go with some Candy King's Lemon Drops. I don't normally use commercial e-liquids, but this is one of the few that I do actually like.
This will be the end of treason as we know it. This will be the death of anger, 'cause we won't show.
All right, I think that should be good. Maybe we're gonna still juice it up a little bit more. You got to be careful when you're putting the top back on as well, because the mesh is or the wicking is so puffed up that a lot of times you'll just smash it down and that kind of ruins the whole thing. All right. quarter turn quick release. Just blay your juice down in there. Crank it back on. There we go. Let's jump back up top, vape on it, and I'll tell you guys what I think. All right, so we've got it at about 0.16, which is where the extreme mesh should be. Got it at about 60 watts with everything wide open. Now 60 watts, 65 is probably pushing it with this. Although I have vaped the extreme mesh as high as 75, 80 watts, but normally I kind of cap it out around 65. Let's give this a go. It's pretty good. It's a little bit too airy for me. I'm going to turn down the airflow about 25%. Give this a go. Even 25% is just a little bit too airy. Let's crank it down about 50%, and I'm going to crank the wattage up to 65. All right, let's give this a go. That's more my speed. It really feels like I could crank the wattage up to 70, honestly. Let's just go ahead and try that. Here we go, 50% cutoff, 70 watts. And I am getting bubbles. It's actually wicking like a dream. The one thing with this, when I first got this RTA in, I kind of wicked it like I normally would, say, the Unity or the Profile M, and it does not work wicking it like that. So what I would do with those two is kind of cut it at that angle and then just cut a little bit off the bottom, give it a little bit of a haircut, but it was still pretty thick on top. You don't want it to be thick on top for this one. So once you cut it at that angle and really kind of cut the cotton away from underneath, after that, you want to thin out that top portion. So it's just kind of a sliver of cotton. It should look almost equal to, say, the cotton you would have with dual 3mm ID coils. Then tuck them down in there. It'll kind of look like it's a bit too much if you get the length right, but you just kind of tuck that back up in there. Then once you put the actual top cap back on, you will see it will wick like a dream. I was actually pretty shocked at how well this thing wicks, and I think every mesh RTA from here on out needs to do their wicking like this, where it's just a giant window and the cotton is exposed to the liquid inside the tank. It works so much better than trying to do it where the liquid actually flows underneath the deck and your wicks are kind of dipped down in it. This just works so much better. It's a lot of airflow, so you may even want to cut it down about 75% closed off. Yeah, that right there is pretty good, and that's about probably 60% cut off. I really like it about there, and I've got it at 70 watts. Flavor off of it is good, but it's not as good as the Profile M or the Profile Unity. I will say that. All right, so pros and cons. What do I like? What do I dislike about the Profile X? Well, I love the deck. The deck is the same one that was used on the Profile RTA, and it has been my favorite mesh deck ever since then. But a big part of the reason why it's my favorite is that ability to use coils. It still has leg lead inserts and their own separate grub screws for each individual coil leg lead. With this, coils are pretty... I don't know why anyone would use coils in this. The flavor is so terrible with coils. There's just no point in using them. Having that top down kind of airflow, even with it angled a little bit, just does not work, and the flavor is not very good with coils at all. This is actually probably the least flavorful Profile RTA that I've ever come across. The Unity and the Profile M have much better flavor than this does. Not that this has bad flavor, but it's just not at the usual kind of peak that most mesh RTAs are at. I love the look of it overall, and the biggest pro for me is the wicking. Like once you get down that you don't need a whole lot of cotton, you actually want it really thin, and then dip down into those wick wells or those wicking channels. Once you get that down, it wicks like an absolute dream. It wicks better than any mesh RTA I've ever come across. Having those windows right there that are actually exposed to the inside of the tank is, in my personal opinion, the best way to wick a mesh RTA, but it is a little finicky to kind of figure out and get right. And it's kind of why this review took so long, because I just could not figure it out. I kept wicking it the way I would any other mesh RTA, and it just didn't work. It would not draw the liquid up fast enough. Then once I kind of thinned out the cotton enough that it was kind of more like a dual coil RDA wick job, it worked a lot fucking better. So I do like this overall, but I don't know if I can recommend it over, say, something like the Profile M or the Profile Unity. It's not as good as those two when it comes to flavor. I do like its wicking method overall, and I really wish the Profile M had more of a similar wicking method to this, and its one kind of con to me would be rectify completely. So hopefully Joel will come back for the next round of Profile RDAs and RTAs and maybe do something similar to this with a better airflow system, but the same kind of wicking technique. Overall, if you really like mesh RTAs, I think you'll enjoy this one. Just remember, it's not going to be quite as flavorful as other mesh RTAs from the past, especially out of the Profile line, but it will wick really well once you kind of get it figured out. Other than that, the quarter turn quick release works great. The airflow overall for mesh works great, just not with coils. And yeah, like I said, it's a good mesh RTA. It's just not as flavorful as most of them out there. And unfortunately, I can't really recommend this unless you're just really into mesh RTAs. Definitely not one for someone that is just trying out mesh RTAs. All right, guys, vape on, and I will catch you all in the next one.